The perfect match. When I was 23, I started seeing a guy named Adam. I had met him on a dating app. Not my first choice, but after a bad breakup, my friends convinced me to put myself out there again. Adam seemed perfect, tall, charming, and polite. He was a doctor, or so he claimed, well-spoken, and always knew exactly what to say to make me laugh. We texted for about 2 weeks before finally meeting. The first date was simple, coffee at a quiet cafe. He was as attractive in person as he was in his pictures. Everything seemed normal, but looking back, I realized there were small red flags from the start. The uneasy feeling. Our second date was at a nice restaurant. He paid for everything, but he insisted I order what he suggested. It was odd, but I brushed it off. He asked a lot of personal questions about my childhood, my job, where I lived. He barely talked about himself. On the third date, he started making odd comments. "You're really beautiful. I bet men stare at you all the time. You're lucky I found you first." He said these things with a smile, but something about them felt wrong. The biggest red flag came after the fourth date. I was heading home when I got a text. "You didn't say goodnight properly." I laughed it off. "Good night, Adam." But then, another text. "Number say it in person. Come back." I thought he was joking. Then I saw headlights behind me. He was following me. The stalker begins. I didn't confront him. I just kept driving. I took random turns to see if it was really him. It was. I called my friend, pretending I was already home, loudly. Eventually, his car turned away. The next morning, he texted, "Sorry about last night. I was just worried about you. Hope you got home safe." I didn't reply. And that's when the obsession began. He knew where I lived. A few days passed with no texts. I thought I was in the clear. Then I got home from work and froze. There was a bouquet of flowers at my door. No card. I told myself it could be anyone. Maybe my parents, a friend. But deep down, I knew. That night, my phone buzzed. "Adam, did you like the flowers?" I felt sick. "How do you know where I live?" No response. The next morning, another text. "I just want to take care of you. You deserve that, don't you?" I blocked his number. I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. The shadow outside my window. Days passed. No calls. No texts. Then I started noticing small things. At night, my motion sensor light in the backyard would go off. I'd hear faint tapping at my window. One evening, I was watching TV when I saw a figure standing in the yard. Just standing. Watching. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend. I was too scared to move the curtain to see if he was still there. The next morning, another text from an unknown number. "Why are you ignoring me?" I blocked that number too. But he kept finding ways to reach me. Emails, social media, even a handwritten letter left in my mailbox. "I miss you. We belong together." I told myself I was overreacting, but deep down I knew. This wasn't love, this was obsession. The break-in, the night I truly feared for my life. I was alone at home. I had been extra cautious, double-checking locks, keeping my phone nearby. I was lying in bed when I heard it. A soft creak, not from outside, from inside. I sat up, heart racing. Listened. Another creak. A floorboard. Someone was inside my house. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend. "Someone's in my house. Call 911. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I slipped off my bed and crawled underneath. My breath was shaky. Then I saw shoes. Right by my bed. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I heard drawers opening. My closet door creaking. Then a whisper. "I know you're in here." My blood ran cold. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then sirens, loud, close. The footsteps hurried out. A door slammed. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. But the front door had been unlocked from the inside. The chilling truth. The police took everything seriously. We found scratches near my window. The lock had been tampered with. They looked for him, but he was gone. A few days later, they found his car abandoned a few miles away. Inside, a notebook filled with pages and pages of my name, my pictures printed out, personal information, my address, my work schedule. One entry made me feel sick. She's so beautiful when she sleeps. I just want to watch forever. I still don't know how many nights he had been inside my home before I woke up. How long had he been watching me? The aftermath: I moved, changed my number, deleted social media, got a restraining order. Months passed. I started to feel safe again. Until one morning at my new place, I found a letter. No stamp, no return address. Just 4 words written in red ink. Did you miss me? I never saw him again. But to this day, I still wonder if he's watching. The new town. It started when we moved. I was 13 when my family left our old home behind and relocated to a quiet, sleepy town in the middle of nowhere. My parents called it a fresh start. I called it boring. Our new house was an old, creaky, Victorian-style home with peeling paint, towering windows, and a front porch that groaned under the weight of even the smallest step. The kind of house where every shadow seemed darker, every floorboard hid a secret. I didn't like it. Neither did my little brother, Noah. He was only 10, but from the moment we arrived, he refused to sleep alone. "They don't like us here," he whispered the first night. I laughed. "Who?" Noah hesitated. "The people in the walls." I told myself he was just scared, just a kid with an overactive imagination, until I started hearing them too. The scratching. At first, it was just small sounds, soft scratching inside the walls, a faint rustling like dry leaves shifting in the attic. Dad said it was rats. Mom called it old house noises. But I knew better, because rats don't whisper. Some nights when I lay in bed, I heard it. Faint, almost impossible to catch. A voice, calling my name. The man at the window. The first time I saw him was 2 weeks after we moved in. I was walking home from school, backpack slung over my shoulder, kicking a loose rock down the sidewalk. Then I felt it, that strange, crawling sensation on the back of my neck. Someone was watching me. I turned my head slowly. Across the street, partially hidden behind an old oak tree, stood a man. Tall, motionless, his head tilted slightly as if observing me. He wore a black hoodie, the hood pulled up over his head, and dark jeans. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, but his posture was stiff, unnatural. I couldn't see his face. I blinked. He was gone. The messages. The first message came the next night. I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. "Why didn't you say hello?" I frowned. Wrong number. I ignored it. The next morning, another text. Unknown number. "I like your red backpack." A chill ran down my spine. I did have a red backpack. I told myself it was a prank, but deep down I knew. Someone was watching me. The late night knocking. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of knocking. Software rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. I lay still, my heart hammering. It was coming from my window. My room was on the 2nd floor. Slowly, I turned my head. Outside, illuminated by the pale glow of the street lamp, stood the man in the black hoodie. His face was pressed against the glass. I screamed. By the time my parents ran in, he was gone. They didn't believe me. "There's no ladder," Dad said. "No way anyone could reach your window." but I knew what I saw, and I knew he would be back. The shadows in the hallway. From that night on, things got worse. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face at my window. Then Noah started acting strange. He refused to sleep in his room. He hardly spoke. One night, I woke up to find him standing in my doorway, his small body silhouetted against the darkness. His voice was flat when he spoke. "He's inside now." A chill ripped through me. "What?" Noah's eyes darted to the hallway. "He's in the house." The video desperate, I set up my phone to record while I slept. The next morning, I watched the footage. For the first few hours, nothing. Just me, tossing and turning. Then, at 3:12 a.m., the closet door creaked open. A figure stepped out. Tall, dressed in black. The hooded man. I watched in horror as he stood at the foot of my bed, just watching. Then slowly he leaned down and whispered something in my ear. I saw myself stiffen in my sleep, as if I heard it. Then, without a sound, he stepped back into the closet and closed the door. I ran to my closet, tore it open, empty, but the scent of rotting leaves filled the air, and on the wall, scratched into the wood, "I see you." The last night, I begged my parents to leave. They wouldn't listen, so that night, I didn't sleep. I waited. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the closet door creaked open. I gripped the knife under my pillow, my pulse thundering. The figure stepped out. Only this time, it wasn't the man in the hoodie. It was Noah. His eyes were wide, blank. "Noah?" I whispered. He just stood there. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and pointed behind me. I felt breath on my neck. A hand clamped over my mouth, and everything went black. The escape, I woke up outside, lying in the woods behind our house. My wrists were tied. My head pounded. A voice whispered in my ear, "You finally noticed me." My scream tore through the trees. Then, a gunshot. The pressure released. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented, just in time to see my dad holding his rifle. And at his feet, the man in the hoodie, dead. The nightmare was over. Or so I thought. The truth. The police investigation revealed everything. The hooded man was a former resident of our house, a childhood friend, of my mother's. He had disappeared years ago, presumed dead. But he never left. He had been living in our walls the whole time, watching, waiting. For me. They found tunnels beneath the house, hidden passageways, and in my closet, a small, carved-out space, filled with photos of me, thousands of them. The real horror? The police said he wasn't working alone, but the second person was never found, and sometimes, at night, I still hear scratching in the walls. I want to remain as anonymous as possible. This is something I haven't spoken about in detail to anyone, not even my closest friends. It's an event that changed me forever. It left me with paranoia and insomnia, and I don't think I'll ever be the same again. For the sake of privacy, I will change all names, locations, and any details that might reveal who I am. For context, I've always been a pretty reserved person. Growing up, I had a small circle of friends, but I mostly preferred my own company. I wasn't necessarily socially awkward, just private. I didn't like sharing much about my life with others, even as I grew into adulthood. My social life revolved around a few close friendships and, on occasion, online interactions. I had never really been interested in dating apps, but my friends convinced me to try one just to put myself out there. At 25, I had a stable job and a comfortable, one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town. One night, I was swiping through the app out of boredom when I matched with a girl named Lisa. She was cute, dark hair, hazel eyes, and a shy but warm smile. Her profile said she was a writer who enjoyed true crime documentaries and hiking. We started chatting, and she seemed genuinely interested in me. She asked thoughtful questions and always responded quickly. It felt nice to be seen, to be noticed. After about a week of talking, she suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated at first, but I agreed. The date went surprisingly well. Lisa was sweet and funny, and I actually enjoyed her company. We started seeing each other more often. She would come over to my apartment to watch movies, and we'd go on late-night drives through the city. Everything seemed perfect at first. Then small things started happening. It began with little oddities, things I brushed off as quirks. She would text me constantly, even when she knew I was at work. If I didn't respond immediately, she'd send messages like, "Are you okay?" Or, "Did I do something wrong?" At first, I thought she was just insecure, but then it escalated. One night, I was hanging out with my best friend Nate at his apartment. We were having beers, playing video games, and catching up. My phone buzzed repeatedly, and when I checked, I saw that Lisa had sent me over 20 messages asking where I was. Then she called me. I declined, thinking I'd text her later. Not even 5 minutes passed before there was a knock at Nate's door. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach as he opened it. Lisa was standing there. She looked furious. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" she asked, her voice shaking. Nate looked at me, confused. I pulled her outside, trying to calm her down. She accused me of lying about where I was and demanded I go home with her. I told her she was overreacting and that I needed space. She stormed off, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few days, Lisa became even more obsessive. She started showing up at my job, waiting outside my apartment, and calling me non-stop. One night, I heard tapping on my window. I lived on the ground floor, and when I looked outside, Lisa was standing there, staring at me. I froze. My hands got clammy. I texted her, "What are you doing?" She replied instantly, "I just wanted to see you. Let me in." I didn't let her in. Instead, I told her we needed to take a break. She lost it. She screamed outside my window, pounding on the glass, calling me names. Eventually, she left. I thought it was over. A week passed and I hadn't heard from her. I was relieved. Then, one night, I woke up to a strange noise. It was the sound of my front door handle jiggling. My stomach dropped. I stayed perfectly still, listening. A moment later, there was a soft knock. "I know you're awake," Lisa's voice whispered through the door. I felt my blood run cold. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I didn't answer the door, and after a few minutes, the noise stopped. When the cops arrived, she was gone. They said there wasn't much they could do since she hadn't actually broken in. I changed my locks the next day. Then, things took a terrifying turn. A few nights later, I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard my closet door creak. My heart stopped. I knew, without a doubt, that I had closed it before going to bed. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I aimed it at the closet. The door was slightly ajar. My breath caught in my throat. I inched forward and pulled the door open. There, crouched in the darkness, was Lisa. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, and she was holding a knife. I don't remember exactly what happened next. Adrenaline took over. I screamed, bolted out of my room, and ran outside. I called the police, and this time they arrived quickly. Lisa was still inside when they stormed in. They found her hiding under my bed. She was arrested and charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted assault. When they searched, her, they found a small notebook filled with notes about me. My schedule, my friends' names, places I went. She had been watching me for weeks. I moved out of that apartment as soon as I could, changed my number, deleted all my social media. To this day, I have no idea what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. Even now, years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to see her standing in the dark. And the scariest part? Sometimes I swear I still feel like I'm being watched.